I ended up creating another company called Due Diligence, which was the very first social media monitoring company. We had problems with some of the college athletic departments that I was working with who were having issues with their athletes posting things on social media, which at that time, Facebook wasn't even around yet. And they kept asking me if there was anything that we could do to help them control that situation before it became a distraction for the coach and the team.
Welcome to Faithly Stories, the podcast that brings you inspiring tales from conversations with church leaders as they navigate the peaks and valleys of their faith journeys through their ministry work and everyday life. Join us as we delve into their challenges, moments of encouragement, and answered prayers. The Faithly Stories podcast is brought to you by Faithly, an online community committed to empowering church leaders, pastors, staff, and volunteers. Learn more at faithly.co. Get ready to be uplifted and inspired as we unveil the heart of faith through stories from the front lines of ministry on the Faithly Stories podcast.
Welcome to the Faithly Stories podcast, Kevin. We are so happy to have you. I was so glad when our mutual friend Brian Boyd introduced us and told me what you do for a living, Kevin, because as much as I wish it weren't the case, your expertise is so relevant and so important to the ministry community. So here at Faithly Stories, we have focused on interviewing pastors and ministry leaders, and you are our first guest who doesn't really fit that description, but you've got something to offer that's really important to that community. So thank you for joining us, Kevin.
Oh, thank you, Alicia, for having me on. I really appreciate the opportunity to hopefully educate your listeners and also help any ministries that might be in trouble with this sort of problem that we solve.
Yeah, so you are the founder and the CEO and the chief social media bounty hunter for Social Imposter. And I want to dig into what all of that means. But let's set the stage first. You are a serial entrepreneur, and you actually started your career in Congress. Like, take us through some of that. Take us through the path that led you to where you are now and what you're doing.
Yeah, so when I was in college, particularly during my sophomore year, I was really kind of bored and wasn't having a great time, and was talking to my counselor at school at Purdue and just telling him how I really just had no kind of direction. And he asked what I liked to do when I wasn't in school. And aside from playing sports and I was very much a news junkie. I was really into politics back then. And he suggested trying to get an internship. So I sent letters to the two Indiana senators and to the congressman from my home district and to Vice President Quayle, who happened to be Vice President to George H.W. Bush at that time. And lo and behold, I got a summer internship in Senator Coates' office and then got a fall internship in Vice President Quayle's press office. So I got to spend about 9 months in Washington, and it only took about a week to be hooked and really wanted to go there after I finished. So when I graduated a couple of years later, I headed straight back to D.C., and I ended up getting a job with another Indiana congressman, Dan Burton, who was from the Indianapolis area. And I worked for him for almost 11 years. And he became committee chairman during the Republican Revolution in 1996. And he brought me over to be a professional committee staffer at that time. I got to work on some really cool stuff, counter-narcotics policy oversight and helping put together the Plan Colombia aid package, and really enjoyed my time there. From there, when the Republicans took over, they term limited their committee chairman to 6 years. And so when the 6 years was up, we were not able to continue. The new committee chairman brought in his own staff and kind of left the rest of us out there looking for a new job. And I ended up becoming a contractor in the Pentagon in the Special Operations Low Intensity Conflict Office, which had counter-narcotics oversight for the Department of Defense. And I worked on projects in Colombia and in Afghanistan. And so I got to enjoy my time there in the Pentagon and work for those companies. And during that time, I came up with an idea for doing media training, which I had a little bit of a background in on the communications side, because when I was on the Hill, I was a press secretary for a while as well for Congressman Burton. And I continued kind of doing media throughout my time as a committee staffer as well. And so when I went into the Pentagon, we were setting up programs to help the Colombian Ministry of Defense and the Afghanistan Ministry of Interior to learn how to better handle the press and create a press office in both of those places. So I was actually in a restaurant in Bogota, and I heard a basketball player during the NBA Finals talking about how they were going to war and how it was a battle. And I just felt like it was kind of very poorly, it reflected poorly upon him. And so I decided that I wanted to start a media training company. And when I came back from Bogota, I set up MVP Sports Media Training, and I ran that for 20 years, where I taught professional, collegiate, and Olympic athletes how to deal with the press, how to speak, how to complete thoughts, how to answer questions in a way that maybe wasn't exactly what the question was about, but to give the answer that they wanted to give. And so from there, I ended up creating another company called Due Diligence, which was the very first social media monitoring company. We had problems with some of the college athletic departments that I was working with who were having issues with their athletes posting things on social media, which at that time, Facebook wasn't even around yet, but it was mostly on MySpace and some other smaller ones at the time. And they kept asking me if there was anything that we could do to help them control that situation before it became a distraction for the coach and the team. So I created a social media monitoring platform called Due Diligence, and we monitored in the beginning student athletes' posts on various social networks and alerted the coaches and the athletic department staff when keywords were mentioned that might have a negative connotation. From there, we expanded that into offering the same service to parents. And I think, unfortunately, we were probably about 3 or 4 years ahead of too early in the marketplace, and people just really weren't familiar enough with social media at the time. The parents, it was still first generation going through social media, so they didn't really understand it. And even though we had, a really successful platform, it just never took off like we thought it was going to. And from there, I created when my daughter started playing softball competitively, was highly ranked in the country in her class, going through the recruiting process with collegiate coaches and drawing on my background from MVP and dealing with the athletic departments. I created a recruiting app for high school athletes to get their game video in front of college coaches. That, again, was a little bit ahead of its time, and it didn't quite take off as quickly or as much as I would have liked it to. And we decided to close that down. And from there, I created, and actually before I did that, I started Social Imposter. And Social Imposter came about because of my contacts during my time in Afghanistan dealing with security personnel. I had a guy that I had worked with that came back to me and said, "Hey, I know you do this social media stuff. I've got a client that has all these fake social media accounts and they have no idea how to deal with it. Is there some way that you might be able to use your contacts at Facebook and Twitter to be able to help them solve that problem?" And I said, "Well, I think so." And within a week, I'd taken down 8,000 accounts for them. And it gave me the idea, well, if this guy's got this problem, this has got to be pervasive. So I started looking around, and I started noticing that the places that seemed to have the most, aside from Hollywood, were ministries. And so I started cold calling ministries whenever I'd see an article in the newspaper or in the Christian press that would mention that we don't solicit for funds on social media. Please don't fall for it. I'd see things like that, and I would reach out to the ministries. And when I got my very first client, it was one of the biggest names in the industry. It just kind of took off from there. And now they are a majority of my clients as ministries. So I really am spending a lot of time helping ministries prevent their followers from being taken advantage of. And it is quite exhaustive and quite extensive, because the social media companies continue to move the goalposts on us and change what we need to do in order to report and successfully remove accounts. And, like almost everything else out there right now, they are almost completely relying on AI to try and resolve request submissions. And whereas in the past, we were able to speak to people directly when we had problems, and, our contacts there were able to leverage those. They've almost completely eliminated human interaction in the sections that deal with social media imposters. And so it's become a challenge when the AI is not quite adaptively learning some of the nuances to how the accounts are made, with maybe a misspelling here or there, or a symbol instead of a letter, and it doesn't fit their guidelines that they've programmed the AI to look for. And so we end up having to use some other methods to try and get those accounts down. But it's that's probably our major headache right now, is the AI has not made things better. It's made it worse. And I think from my perspective in dealing with them being the social networks for almost 15 years now, I've come to the realization that they're not in the business of removing accounts. They want as many accounts as they can have, whether they're legitimate or not. And because they get clicks, and with the clicks comes advertising revenue, and nobody's in the business of trying to hurt their revenue. So if you can make a good case and have a pretty unflappable imposter, they'll begrudgingly take it down, but they're not going out of their way to do any sort of things that might be in the gray area, where they're using the misspelling, or a fan page that's has the word fan in somewhere in the bio or the username. They don't consider those to be imposters. They don't consider imposters to be accounts that don't have a profile or a banner photo of the person. And this one's big in the ministry section, where they'll set up accounts that either show the primary principal on the profile photo, but it's for the ministry, or reverse, they'll show the ministry logo where the username is of the principal. And they don't consider either of those to be violations, even though they're out there. And a lot of times they just steal the content directly from the ministry's accounts and put them on those pages that they've created. So that's kind of my Cliff's Notes version of how we handle things right now. But I'm happy to answer more questions.
Yeah, I've got a lot of questions. There's a lot to dive into there. The first is just the observation that, you've been running this business for 10 or 15 years now. And it seems to me like, unlike maybe some of the other things you've done where you've been a few years early, you came into this space at exactly the right time. And as you alluded to with AI, things are only getting worse. This is only becoming more important for pastors to understand and to deal with. So I'll just say from my own experience being on social media, that I have noticed that over the last year alone, and this is not an exaggeration, I've probably gotten a dozen messages from pastors telling me, hey, just so you know, there is an imposter account out there. I would never ask you for money. So just be wary, because I know there are imposter accounts out there for me. I've gotten many messages like that. I've also gotten follow requests from the names of high profile pastors, where I'll actually say to myself, oh, this is exciting. Like, so-and-so pastor is interested in me or interested in what I'm doing. He must have noticed X or Y that I'm doing. And it's actually only maybe a day later that I might notice, wait a second. this is not actually the pastor. And it'll be like a picture being a little funny or a word being a little funny that'll tip me off. But I almost don't notice it right away, right? It's very nuanced. And then the third observation I'll make is that it's not just the high profile pastors. I've noticed that over the past year, as I've noticed an uptick in these sorts of messages and this kind of activity, that even pastors with, let's just say, just a couple thousand followers are susceptible to this activity. So, I sort of offer that to you as like my own personal observations, and I'm curious if that is what you see as well.
Alicia, that's it's very observant for you to notice those things, but I think you hit something in your first observation, which was that you're like, oh, he's interested in what I'm doing. That they are very well versed in the psychology of creating these accounts and playing on people's emotions and desires to be important, recognized, and that tugs at everybody's heartstrings. When common sense may tell you, well, why is Rick Warren, Joel Osteen, T.D. Jakes, why are they contacting me? Oh, maybe they saw this. You start justifying it or making a reasonable conclusion in your mind. Well, this is probably why. And that's exactly what they're looking for. And, once their typical MO is once they get you on board, they start hitting you with, prayers or messages with prayers in them, or what can I do for you? And then the ask will come. So they lay the groundwork, the foundation for the con. And then they hit you with it after they made you feel comfortable that they were the right person. And, oh, this is my private account. I don't like, people to know which account I'm really using. They'll use those things. And in your mind, you're kind of like, this doesn't sound right, but you know what? I really want to, I want to help him. You get to the point where you've convinced yourself that, yeah, this is the real account. And we see this happen time and time and time and time and time again. And it's unfortunate because the people that they're preying on think they're doing good. They think that they're helping ministries. They're helping the cause that the ministry is supporting or promoting. In reality, they're giving money to somewhere that's probably a pretty well-funded criminal organization in Africa or Eastern Europe, are usually the two places where those scams emanate from. And it's really kind of the modern day email scam that used to be in the early 90s when those things were pervasive. And, criminals are very smart. A lot of times they're ahead of the times. They're well ahead of law enforcement most of the time. And they are very good with using technology. And, they could send out, it's the same way that they used to send out 1 million emails and hope they'd get 10 responses and they'd move on. The same thing goes for sending direct messages. And because they're able to access the follower lists of the real accounts, they know who to target when they're sending out these messages. And so they go in and they'll send a friend request to the people that are on the friend list or follower list of the ministry or the pastor. And so it's not unusual to feel that way because that's the psychology behind what they're doing. So they're pretty good at it. Secondly, I would say to your question about the pastors that are, only have a couple thousand followers, those are probably more likely to get hit than the big name people because it's more realistic that they might reach out to you than a Joel Osteen, a Rick Warren, or somebody like that. So then you're like, oh, you can really justify it in your mind at that point. And what's devastating to these ministries is that, they're out there helping people, they're ministering to people, they're spreading God's word, and they're being taken advantage of. And even worse, I think the ministries understand to some extent that type of activity goes on, unfortunately. But the problem is the folks that are being impacted by this beyond the reputation of the ministry are the followers. And they're the people that maybe can't afford to give the money that they're like, oh, well, if he's asking for it, I really want to help his cause and I want to make that happen. And then they don't get an acknowledgement. They don't get anything afterwards unless they're continuing to ask for more money. And, we've had stories of people giving away thousands and tens of thousands of dollars to these people only to find out later that they had been taken advantage of. And it's so unfortunate and heart-wrenching and gut-wrenching to hear those stories. And it just really makes you upset that people are taking advantage of folks like this. And it continues to happen. They'll work on one pastor and they'll move to the next, and they just keep going. So I think from my perspective, it's really incumbent on the ministries to be proactive and not just posting things on their social media saying, I'll never ask for it over social media, but actually going out and trying to find these folks and remove them. And I understand it's time consuming because this is what I've done for the last 15 years. So I know how much time it takes to do it. And that's why we offer the service, because a lot of ministries aren't well staffed and they don't have staff they can dedicate to this. And again, even if they did, they may not understand the complexities that are involved in dealing with the networks in order to get them down. And so we take down thousands of accounts a week, and it's, that's not something that any ministry is capable of handling on their own. And so, and everybody's got a different pain level too, a different tolerance level for this sort of fraud. And to some ministries, one imposter account is way too many. Whereas others, they may consider it, not that big of a deal since there's only a couple. But I think if you have that attitude, you're really doing a disservice to the people that believe in you and follow you and want to help you if you're not proactively out there trying to stop these people from taking advantage of people. And we're not perfect. We miss some because the spellings aren't right. It may be an account that switches profile photos regularly. And so, we don't catch them all. But what we do tell all of our clients is if someone reaches out to you with an account, send it to us and we'll find it and get it taken down. But I'd say we're probably 99.9% effective at finding the accounts, but we're not perfect. We do have some that get biased occasionally, and we happily take the links from the clients and submit them and get them down for them.
Thanks for that, Kevin. So let me ask you a couple of questions, maybe from a follower's perspective, because we do have folks on our platform who are not pastors or sort of key ministry leaders, but they're volunteers at churches, and their faith and their service are an important part of who they are. But let's say you're a follower, and you get taken in by one of these imposters. Is money the only thing that gets asked for, or should they be looking out for any other kind of asks?
Within the ministries, it's usually money, and they try to get you comfortable with them by starting with a prayer. Let me pray for you. Is there anything we can do to help you? So you get this sense of, they're wanting to help me, to feel comfortable with them. That's kind of how they lure you in, and then they hit you with the ask in most cases. But it's I think that they're occasionally they'll fall for, can you send me the password for this? I lost the password. Well, why, you would think, well, why don't you call me or email me? But there are things like that where they could be fishing for access to it. And especially in the volunteers case, if they have access to the business suites or the account login information for the ministry, those things can get hacked and taken over if they don't have two-factor authentication in place, or if they click on a link that has a phishing scam attached to it where they're going to have keystrokes, malware placed on their computer. It's when you're in a smaller ministry, you're not that security conscious usually because it's not something that's going to be happening to you regularly. But you should be. You should always have your guard up, and it's unfortunately you should be suspect of anything that comes to you like that. And, you may they may use the exact same photo that's on the real person's account, and you may momentarily be fooled by it. And I think so key points for security on that for the ministries are: make sure that anyone who has access to your accounts has two-factor authentication, a layer put in, which should prevent 99% of the hacks from happening. or don't let them use the account if they don't have it in there. If they don't know how to use it, go on YouTube, watch a video, show them how to use it, because that's going to keep your accounts about as secure as you can in the environment that we're in. And I realized that especially in smaller ministries where they rely on those volunteers, it's hard to ask people to do stuff like that. But for the security of your followers and the security of your ministry, it's really kind of incumbent on you to create that sort of cybersecurity awareness as well within the people that are working within the organization.
Wow, that's such a great point. I had not thought about that. I hadn't thought about the scenario where maybe someone's impersonating a pastor, reaching out to a volunteer, trying to get passwords for key ministry software and technology and suites and so forth that the ministry might be using. And so many churches are powered by volunteers. I can see that could be a real key point of vulnerability. So thanks for mentioning that. So for pastors that have some kind of a profile, right, where they have followers, and this is maybe an area where they know they're vulnerable, and they reach out to you, Kevin, and they look to hire you, give them a sense of like the first 3 things you do to sort of secure things for them and for their social media.
So the first thing we'll do is we'll do a complete deep dive sweep of all the networks that we cover, which are Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and X right now. And we do those because they're the ones that are the most likely to respond to our request to remove the accounts. They know who we are. They're used to us dealing with them. The other networks are not nearly as responsive, or they're not responsive at all to removal requests. So, while we can find fake accounts there, it's really kind of a waste of time because they won't take them down. So we don't cover accounts on networks that are non-responsive. And, we've had some that were responsive and no longer are, like YouTube and LinkedIn. They just don't respond. But we have, we have pretty good success rate within the networks that we do cover. So we'll do a full sweep. And then we'll come back to them and say, this is, from what we see, this is what we see, as being a major problem for you, or, we see it being 5 a month, 10 a month, 1,000 a month, whatever the number that we see based on how many we find in that initial sweep. And then we get those taken down over the first week that we're working with them. And then from that point on, we provide them with a weekly, monthly, and annual email that tells them we found 5 accounts on Facebook, 6 on Twitter, and 4 on TikTok this week. And we just accumulate those over time. And each email alert, they get to see what we're doing for them weekly. And, you might say, well, gee, if we've had 3 weeks of not having anything, do we really need this? But I would come back to that and say, well, it's the one that you don't get. The week that you have 1, that's the problem, not the week that you don't have 3. You should be praising the Lord that you were able to get by these 3 weeks without having any accounts that are up there. But it's kind of like mowing the grass, right? You maybe you don't have time to mow the grass, so you hire somebody to mow it. One thing you know is it's going to grow, and you're going to need them to come back again in a week or 2. And that's kind of the analogy that we like to use with our clients is, we're like a lawn service. Eventually there's going to be problems in your yard and you need your grass cut. And that's kind of what we're there to do. And depending on the climate you're in, which would be how large your ministry is, how active you are on social media, how prominent your ministry might be, and even the ones that are not prominent, still have problems. And so, one thing that we committed to in the beginning when we were doing this was we were going to provide our ministries with a rate that was significantly less than what we charge our corporate folks, because we're believers. We've grown up in the church. We understand that helping other people pass on the word of the Lord is one of our callings. So we provide it at a significantly discounted rate compared to what we do corporate clients with, and we give them the same service. It's not a lesser service. It's what we have. And in fact, I was just talking with one of my team members yesterday about this, in that in the beginning, we had software that was able to go out and scan and search all the networks using their APIs. And then in 2016, the networks had specifically Facebook at the time had the Cambridge Analytica scandal, where people were accessing data through the APIs and then doing things with it they agreed not to do. So they shut down the APIs for a while. And when they restarted them, they had removed the ability to search by username, which is how we were finding all the fake accounts that existed on their system through that, which caused us to have to go back to searching manually. So the difference between the machine doing the searching for us and the amount of time having to go through manually every day and search our clients is significant. But we didn't go back and say, okay, we're going to charge you more because now we're spending more time on it. We've kept the rates the same. So hopefully our clients appreciate that, and we're still giving them the same service. And it just takes a little longer in some cases than it would have with the machine doing the searching for us.
Yeah, that makes sense. And so for the platforms where you said the platforms aren't responsive to you, I think the examples you gave were LinkedIn and YouTube, that when you reach out, they don't respond to you about the fake accounts that you find. Is there any advice you give to ministries around that? For instance, do you ever recommend to them that they don't be active on those platforms?
Well, I guess it's kind of a double-edged sword with that, because you can say, well, don't be active on there, but LinkedIn, maybe not so much, but on YouTube, it's a great way. I mean, the audience is significant on there, and you don't really want to hamper the ministry getting out their message by not using the account just because people may steal the videos and put it on their own. They'll steal videos from any means, any network, and put them on there. So I would rather have an account, get it verified, and use that account as much as I could than to say, just don't use it because it's so bad. Well, then who's going to take over? There's going to be hundreds of accounts on there, and there still are, but there'll be dozens to hundreds of accounts that are putting your videos out there. There is one program within LinkedIn that allows you to report the intellectual property violations of the videos, and they come down pretty quickly if you can get into the program. And that program is called Content ID. And it takes a while to apply and get accepted. But when you do, if you report a video for being violating your intellectual property, then the usually comes down within seconds. But it only takes down the videos. They don't take down the accounts, which is just, I go back to, they're not in the business of removing accounts. So they'd rather have an account out there with your profile photo on it and no videos than to take the account down altogether if all they're posting is your videos. It just makes no sense. The common sense goes out the window when you're dealing with social media companies, and you really just got to kind of get in their head and figure out what they're trying to do, or try to figure it out anyway, in order to be successful.
Yeah, that's a great point. In order to operate on these platforms, you kind of have to get into their heads, right? And know what their motivations are and sort of operate around that. It's so encouraging to hear about how you think about serving these ministries and the rates that you charge and being sensitive to that. I guess my question for you is, there are ministries that have budget for this sort of a thing, but there are also ministries, for example, like church planters, who are still fundraising, still trying to get their churches, their ministries off the ground. For any ministries that don't yet have the budget to work with you and work with your company, are there a couple of things you can suggest to them, like as they're maybe getting set up, that they can do to just be smart about this sort of thing?
Yeah, definitely. Even if you're budget conscious, the thing that I would do is go ahead and pay to get the verification on the networks that allow you to do that, because then at least you have something that should be a sign to everybody that's following you on there that it's a legitimate account. Yeah, it's a few $100, but in the long run, you may be saving someone who wanted to give you a few $100 from making a mistake and giving it to someone who's scamming folks. So, and I think as more and more people who are followers and maybe some of the older generations that are finally feel like they're becoming comfortable with social media, they're learning the verified account is something to be, to be what you look for in places. So it's kind of that seal of approval. Back in the old days, it would be the Better Business Bureau seal and, the Good Housekeeping seal. Getting those verifications, I think, is critical to any ministry, large or small. It's worth the extra expense to pay that to get those things verified. And if, in some cases, they don't have the business set up yet, but they're going to. And as soon as they do, that's when you really need to act on that and get it in place as soon as you can. I know a lot of the ministries, when they start out, they're just using the pastor's personal accounts for things, and they don't necessarily set up a ministry account to start with. But as you roll along and as your ministry grows, it's probably incumbent on you to also set up a ministry account and then request verification for it as quickly as possible. Don't fall for the scams of people saying, "Oh, if you we'll get you 100,000 followers if you pay us X amount of dollars." Don't do that, because you're just going to get bot accounts that somebody's created somewhere to follow you, and the networks will see that and see it's not a legitimate follower account. And so it becomes, your account becomes suspect then and less likely to get verified if you're using bot accounts to pump up your follower account. So I would avoid doing that. But yeah, I think the best thing that ministries can do in that case is make sure you get a verified account and let people know, hey, this is my real account. Don't fall for anything else. And once they get the budget, then they need to come and speak to us and let us help protect their ministry and their followers.
Wow, this has been really enlightening, Kevin. Thank you for sharing your experience and your wisdom with us in this area. I have a feeling that this is going to be front and center for a long time. And for me personally, and for Faithfully, we're not building social media per se, but we're not building social media. There are a lot of similarities between what we're building at Faithfully and some of these other secular platforms that are out there. And so hearing from you is also incredibly important for us to make sure we're building a secure platform that we're inviting ministry leaders onto. So thank you, Kevin. Really appreciate your time today. Really appreciate your experience and sharing all of that with our audience.
Well, thank you, Alicia. I really appreciate the opportunity to get on, and hopefully it will help somebody somewhere, and it'll all been worthwhile.
Don't let me forget. We're going to include links to you and to your company in our show notes. But maybe you could just briefly share for a couple of seconds where people can find you if they want to get in touch.
Sure. You can reach us at socialimpostor.com, and that's with an OR at the end. And so socialimpostor.com, and you can go on there, and we have a contact form on there, and you can reach out to us through that. And we're pretty responsive to those when they come in.
Yeah, not AI run, right? At socialimpostor.com. You will reach actual human beings.
Yep. We are real, and we will respond.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, Kevin. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Alicia. Have a great day.
You too.
Thank you for tuning in to the Faithfully Stories podcast. We pray this episode gave you the encouragement you needed to continue on your journey. The Faithfully Stories podcast is brought to you by Faithfully, an online community committed to empowering church leaders, pastors, staff, and volunteers. The Faithfully digital platform offers innovative and practical tools and resources to enhance connection, foster collaboration, and promote growth within the church and ministry space. Remember to subscribe, rate, and review our podcast to help reach more listeners like you. Stay tuned for more uplifting tales from the front lines of ministry on the Faithfully podcast. Stay bold, stay faithful, and never underestimate the power of your own story.